Hi, it's Jeff Chalmers here from discoverdouble-bass.com, where you can go to learn about the double bass. We can help you on your journey with our lessons, courses and interviews, just like this one, which comes from the Theatre Zudplein and the 2021 Dutch Double Bass Festival, who's presented we have the artistic director with us presenting this year's edition of the festival over in Rotterdam. And it's been an absolute joy to witness this incredible lineup, which we'll hear about in just a moment. But we're going to learn more about the artistic director, and you will have a wonderful opportunity to hear him play some solo music at the end of this video. So it gives me enormous pleasure to welcome James Oesi. James, thank you. It's great to have you here with us today.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to have you guys here.
Well, I was going to say, you invited, you invited us.
Yeah, indeed.
And here we are in Rotterdam, and it's been an incredible event. I mean, just give us a rundown of who's performed in this year, because obviously the event will have passed when we release this video.
Yeah, indeed.
But who did we have the pleasure of spending time with?
Actually a lot of people, and so indeed we're now sort of literally in the middle, because we had the first day yesterday and we're about to have the second day. And so we've had, so far we've had Dave Holland with John Scofield. We had Mad Life. I don't know if you caught some of Mad Life.
I didn't see the performance, unfortunately, because we were working at the time.
No, of course. Fuensanta Mendes.
Yes, she is charming and an incredible singer as well as a bass player. Right? She's such an artist. I love her music.
Yeah, no, amazing. Ben Williams.
Yes, absolutely.
Derek Hodge.
Yes.
Bojo Paragic. Let me think. Florentin Ginaud. It's a long list of names.
Jasper Hoibu.
Jasper Hoibu, yes.
Yeah. There'll be people that will have missed.
Yeah,
off,
indeed.
Sure.
No, I'm a little bit. My brain is escaping me, and so I'm forgetting a lot of.
Dominic Saldis and Sasha
Witteveen.
Yes. They are performing today as a duo. We hope we might get to speak to them if we're lucky. We'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah, the event really has been wonderful, and I was hoping that we could spend some time unpicking the theme of the festival. So what's this year's theme, and why did you choose it?
So the theme is the bassist revolution, which I think is something that all of us bassists kind of understand. And basically it's, I think, quite incredible to see how the level of bass playing throughout the whole world has risen so quickly. It's become like, I mean, I'm 32. And in my, since I've been playing the bass, I can't compare now with when I started.
Yes.
It was really, and that improvement of level has had a really big effect, or is having a big effect, on, I think, especially in the classical music world, on the perception of the bass as an instrument in general, which I think is sort of high time. Because, you have now people who can just play so much better, and so they want to play more. They want there to be more music for the bass, and so you have composers who are writing more music for the bass, and so you have audiences who are getting much more used to seeing the bass in a context that's not just in an orchestra. Do
you find that the audience reception has changed then? That I imagine when you were starting doing solo recitals, you would have heard a lot of, wow, I didn't know the bass could do that. Or I didn't really know what the bass sounded like on its own, and I didn't know you could play that high. And, is that a cello? These kind of questions. Well, has that changed?
Yes, it changes slowly, I've noticed. With me, in my personal experience, it has definitely changed. I remember some of my first concerts, and I would get comments like, "Oh, when you dragged that thing on stage, I didn't think any music would be able to come out of it." I'm like, "Oh, well, thanks, I guess." or that people say, "Oh, what are you going to play?" And then I'd say, "Oh, some Bach," and they'd say, "On that?" And so I'm like, "Well, yeah." And that I don't get so much anymore, which is nice. But I still get a lot of, and that makes me happy. I get a lot of people who do say, "Well, I really had no idea that a bass could sound that great, or that or that you could be so moved with one instrument." And sometimes, and that kind of makes me laugh. And my partner and I sometimes make the joke, "Oh, that's progress." No, it's not though. Sometimes it has happened in the occasional solo recital that by accident on the program it says James Oesi cello, which yeah,
Ouch.
Exactly. And then I think, I'll sort of chalk that up to them just not being used to like to writing that, double bass. Yeah. So no, but that has changed, and it is changing.
And it's so exciting to hear so much more new music being written specifically for the bass, and helping us, present these new works not as interpretations of cello music, but of our compositions just for us.
Yes.
We want those guys to be stealing our compositions because they're so strong.
Yeah.
How about your program? How much new music and how much traditional repertoire are you playing? Because I think I know I was first introduced to your playing by a wonderful video on YouTube where you're playing some Bach. And it was really special. And I think a lot of people will have seen this video, and we'll provide links underneath. But how are you balancing your program? And are there any composers that you're excited about who are writing for our beloved instrument today?
Definitely. Really, really good question. So sort of just trying to take it apart in my mind because it covers quite a lot.
I was going to say it's a broad question.
Yeah. but kind of, I think, important topics, because something that I've always struggled always sounds so heavy, but I used to struggle with it, and now I try and have fun with it, is what to transcribe, when and how. That is especially for us in the bass world it's quite a minefield of a subject. And then on the other hand, commissioning new pieces, playing new music, which is the future. I mean, literally. But the way I don't know. It's a tough question, because I've sort of gone through. Or no, actually, I guess no. I haven't gone through periods, but there's a lot of people have a lot of opinions about what you should be doing as a bassist who's being a soloist. And yeah, sorry, it's a tough one to gather my thoughts on, I'm noticing. Because I know that, because I've had a lot of people tell me that, like, you shouldn't be playing transcriptions, or you shouldn't be playing music that's written for the cello, or music that's written for the violin, or I remember somebody once said to me, "Oh no, I believe that a composer wrote a piece of music for a specific instrument, and that's just the way it should be."
Yes.
And it's funny, because it's such nonsense, I mean, to just be really frank, it's like, it's such a lot of nonsense, because everybody's been transcribing everything since music has been around, and suddenly when it's about a bass, it's all it becomes really controversial. And I mean, we're all happy to listen to pianists play Bach and play Rachmaninoff transcriptions of Bach, and we think, oh, it's genius and it's beautiful, and it is. But if we do it, then it's kind of sad. But I think part of that comes from how it's done. Because I think there is an art to transcribing music, and I think, I know, and this is something that I did struggle with, especially when I was a student, this feeling that, if you're going to play especially a cello piece, because the cello is so dangerously close to our instrument, that, then you have to play everything in the octave it was written. This is something that I know when I was a student was like a big thing about among us students, like, which octave do you play in? And it becomes very easy to get kind of sidetracked and to lose the reason that you're transcribing the piece to begin with, which has nothing to do with which octave or which key it's in. And
expectations of other people. And
exactly.
That's the opposite of what you should be thinking about, your interpretation.
Exactly. But it can become, it's a difficult trap that you can fall into. But I think if you kind of put all of that to the side and you focus on the music, you focus on why do I want to play this piece, and usually it's because for me at least, I think it's a great, beautiful piece, and I think it could sound really great on the bass. And then you, at least, I only speak for myself, but you make different decisions in how you transcribe something, and then it doesn't matter that you're playing a piece that wasn't originally written for the bass, So so that's kind of like the transcription side of things, and then on the other side of things, I do try and play a lot of new music, and I try and often put new music and old music on the same program, just simply because I think as a listener, it is nice to hear the to have contrasts and have, you know, the differences. And I feel like you can appreciate each one more when you have them in a sort of context of the history of everything, you know.
Absolutely.
And I mean, some of the greatest composers I know, if I hear a concert that's only one composer, it can sometimes become, you can sometimes lose your appreciation, you know.
Yes.
Which is a real pity. So that's how I try and balance. I don't know if it answers the question well.
It absolutely does. I mean, it's such a big topic. I can kind of think I threw a wide open question at you there. I mean, it's just been really interesting to see the elegance that you present the music with. And one of the things that I was noticing when you were playing earlier was just the ease that you move around the instrument. And maybe since you have this beautiful double bass here, you could tell us a little bit, about this instrument in particular.
Yeah.
Is it, I mean, it's, certainly very different to your regular off-the-shelf double bass.
Yes.
So maybe give us a little overview about what this bass is and what it's from.
Yeah, so this is a bass that comes from Ancona in Italy. It was built in 1872.
Okay.
By Giuseppe Baldantoni. And it is indeed a guitar form instrument.
Yes.
And in more ways than one. Like guitar form, we think of like no corners, which is really obvious, but it's also very, very flat.
Yes.
You see there's like very little arching.
Yes.
And it's quite thin as well.
Yeah, maybe you could go sort of side on, maybe towards this camera over here. We might be able to see a little bit more.
I'll show this side. It's a bit,
the ribs are really, really quite narrow, aren't they? And
and it is a very flat kind of, so it's really, in the sort of truest sense of the word, a guitar bass.
A beautiful back.
It is very beautiful, and it's a really beautiful instrument.
And it was originally was it originally a
three-string?
Three-string, because you can see.
You can see it's been butchered.
Well, they've done a lovely job. I mean, I noticed the cut in the plates there, but the machines look.
Yeah, well, these two are original.
Right.
And you say they've done a lovely job.
Yeah.
Until you see, exactly.
Yeah.
Until you see this one.
Yes.
Which is the ugly duckling of the family.
I think it's part of the story of the instrument, though. I love it. For me, that's more character.
Yeah.
And it's obviously had a beautiful neck graft at some point, because that neck looks stunning.
Yeah, you can see here
And how long have you had this instrument for?
I've had it for 6 years. I've had it since 2015.
And did it really feel very different? Because to me, it looks quite different. I mean, for what you were playing, presumably a regular three-quarter size bass. Before.
It took a long time to get used to, because it's a bass that somehow sounds best if you're listening to somebody else playing it.
Okay.
Like it doesn't. I don't know, when you play it yourself. I mean, I've especially recently, I think this last year, I've gotten much better in connecting with the sound of the instrument and using the sound as an anchor. And then I noticed then you do kind of almost like you create your own acoustic. But it somehow doesn't come that easily. But as soon as I give it to somebody else and I say, "Oh, can you play this?" I always think, "Wow, that sounds
lovely,
really good." Yeah. And the bass I played before this was a French bass, and it sounded it was also a beautiful bass, but it sounded exactly the same if I played it, if I gave it to somebody, if I heard a recording of it.
But your perception is different from.
Yeah.
It's just before you maybe. I know everyone will love to hear a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to play in just a moment. But is the string length fairly standard, or is it?
It's quite small. It's 101 centimeters.
101. Okay, so a bit below.
Yeah, below average, definitely.
It certainly seems a very nimble instrument, the way that you're able to play.
Yes, it is. It's funny because it also has, I guess, an E-flat neck, which also took me a really long time to get used to. I've spoken to some bassists who said, "Well, it doesn't make any difference. Just give me a bass," and I believe them. But I'm not one of those players. For me, that's
my experience exactly.
Yeah,
I know for some people they are not bothered. I've seen it with my own eyes. Whatever. Bozo used to. I remember asking him when he taught me at college once. I was saying, "What do you find it hard to perform on all these different instruments?" Because I'd be giving him my bass.
Yeah.
He said, "I can't even remember when I last played my bass. I've been travelling around all this time, and so it's yeah." So maybe let's hear a little bit. And you're tuning how?
Well, my tuning right now, because I was playing some of the D minor, the Bach D minor suite. So then I just tuned down to it with a low D. So D, A, D, and G. So
it's got such a singing tone. Would you mind playing just something just for a moment, James?
Yeah.
Honestly, it is so much of a privilege to be able to just sit here. When you were playing the double stops at the beginning, it was like the energy of the two notes. It's kind of distinct.
Yeah.
It didn't sound like this mush it sounded different to any bass that I've heard. It's really it's got so much character.
Yeah.
You're a very lucky man, and it really suits you.
Thank you. Yeah. No, it's a funny because the way this bass kind of came into my life was very unexpected.
I was going to ask you about I'm never quite sure if I can ask people about this, because often they, like basses may be gifted or loaned, and there may be some story behind it. But would you share?
Yeah, definitely. It is a weird story.
You didn't buy it on Tom, I'm guessing,
Yeah, imagine. Saw it on eBay. $20.
Oh.
No. Yeah, exactly. No, at the time it's actually a really weird story if I now think of sort of like where I was in my life and what was like happening. But because I was actually in a period where I was playing a lot of orchestra auditions. Yeah. And it was funny because I have nothing against playing in orchestra, but it isn't for me. It's that simple. But it was, I don't know, I just graduated and I thought, well, I guess maybe and everyone was sort of saying, oh, I guess you're gonna get a job in an orchestra. And so much so that at a certain point I thought, maybe I should. Maybe that's sensible. Maybe that's what I should be doing. And so I remember doing all of these auditions, and it was a very weird. If I look back, it was very weird because I was working really hard, and it was completely passionless for me because it just wasn't where my heart was. And every time, and some of them I think I remember I did a New York Phil audition, and that was like a really big one. Went to New York and
absolutely,
and I got to the second round, and it was the first audition that I advanced, which was really it was really weird. But I just remember that every time that the sort of the road would be cut short, I would feel so sort of indifferent to the whole thing. Which anyway, long story short, it was good to sort of go through that to just confirm that this is not the road you need to be going down. But the irony of it is that in that period, my teacher's wife at the time was really convinced that part of the reason I wasn't doing well in auditions was because of the bass that I was using. Yeah. And I thought it was a lovely bass. It's the French bass I mentioned. And I still have it, and I play often on it, and it sounds beautiful. And she said, yeah, but it's just it's so hard to play, and it's just it doesn't have. And she's a real orchestral bass player, and she has an incredible old Italian instrument that sounds really like it's really, and it's really easy to play. Like you kind of just go like this.
The orchestra canon.
Exactly. And my bass was not like that at all. And she really, she was really, she's like, yeah, this bass, it's just this bass, James, this bass, you can't expect, if you're going to play this bass. And then in their family, because their family, there's some kind of heavy hitter musicians in their family. And one of them, it turns out, was this really big bass player in the 80s in the Netherlands. And he turned into this really big composer, more in the sort of jazz, improvised, avant-garde scene. but he had stopped playing, and over the last like 20 years, he had been selling off his basses. And she phoned me one day and she said, "I've seen this bass, and it's his last bass, and it's his it's like his favorite bass, and he's selling it, and this is your bass." And I was like, "Oh," and she said, "This is your bass, James." And I was like, "Okay." You sort of thought, I don't know what to do with this information, but and she said, "You need to look at this bass." And I said, "Yeah, but," and she said, "It's this old Italian instrument, you know." And I thought, "Yeah, but, you know, I've just graduated from conservatory, and I thought, basically, I don't have like hundreds of thousands of euros sitting in my bank account, waiting to, for an old Italian bass to come along." And so I said to her, "Well, I mean, I'm not in a position to buy a bass right now." And she said to me, and she was really insistent. She said, "No, I know." She said, "But just look at it for me." And I said, "Well, sure. Yeah, okay. For you, I'm happy to look at it." And so then they got the bass from him, and my teacher, he called me up and he said, "I've got the bass here. It's a really crazy instrument. It's, you know." And then I went to his house and he said, "Here you go," and he gave it to me, and I took it home, and I remember like looking at it and thinking, "Wow, this is such a crazy." I don't know. It was such a crazy instrument. And I started playing on it, and I was like, "Oh wow, this is really, really something." And then I was like, "Oh no, like, I'm gonna have to sell my bass." And then what happened, and it's quite an odd story, is I was trying to get a different project off the ground at the time, and I was looking up funding information for this other project, and one of the foundations that I was looking at, they had a sort of thing on their website where you could fill in, okay, what is the project about? Is it about this? Is it about that? And one of the questions was, are you looking for funding for an instrument? And I was like, "Oh well, it just so happens," and it turned out that they had this like foundation that helped young musicians buy an instrument that they didn't advertise because they were scared that then far too many people would apply for it. And I applied and I got it. And it was, and then I could just buy this instrument, and so it felt like somebody just gifted it, put this instrument in my hands. It was like, "Here you go, no strings attached," and it was such a weird feeling. And because I remember, I was like, I've heard these kind of stories like happening to other people,
yes,
but not to me, like not to me. And so I remember I was also really paranoid in the beginning, like, "Oh my God, so something's going to happen," like, and that was. And now it's
it's just an incredible event that happens in your life, and it suits you so much. Seeing you and the bass together. You're made for each other, and I'm thrilled that you found each other. Just quickly to finish off, a couple of small questions that people may be thinking about at home in terms of the instrument. What strings are you using?
I am using strings from Gerald Gensler.
I thought you might be.
Yes.
Did you have to get a loan to buy those?
Pretty much, yeah.
They're beautiful strings.
Yeah, they're beautiful strings.
But they are handmade strings,
yes,
so they are more expensive than a regular set.
They are. That being said, I must say, Gerald has become insanely busy, and of course with his new string line. But I managed to. I was very lucky that I sort of got in just before it got crazy busy. And the first time, I think that the first time actually I met him was, I think, in 2016. So like right after I'd gotten this bass. And this bass, when it came to me, it had, and I'm really bad with identifying strings, but it had the ones where the winding is blue and yellow.
Piastra Permanence, maybe?
I'll take your word for it. I think so. A lot of, there was a period when they were really popular.
Quite a bright orchestra string.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think they were like 20 years old.
Right.
And it had an aluminium tailpiece.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. And it was just... Wow. It was just, I don't know, it felt like the instrument was saying, like, "Please save me." And so I thought, and I'd heard a lot about him, and I'd heard Shimon and Bojo, who were big advocates of his, and they sounded great, not only because of their strings, but their sound was really good. And so I went to him, and when I'd gotten to him, he had been working like 2 weeks, making like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different kinds of strings that he thought would work best with this instrument.
Wow.
Like that was the time when, and I think it is still actually, that he would insist that you go there with his instrument so that he could make.
I know that they measure the bass and things, and I believe that the new company is it Tempera Strings?
Tempera, yeah.
Well, I'll be certainly providing a link
Yeah.
underneath so people can learn more about them, because they are the strings that are incredibly popular. And just lastly, how about the bow? It looks a little bit different. Is it?
It's it's also a very weird bow. It is actually, I got this bow via Gerald Krusig.
Okay.
And I think, what's it? I can't remember.
It also looks like some kind of
it looks like it looks like a hybrid bow, but it isn't.
Yeah.
Krusig, I can't remember his first name, but he's an old German guy, German bow maker, and he was working with Gerald at the time, because Gerald has a whole philosophy. And in his philosophy, like, you need a different tailpiece.
Yes.
You need everything needs to be. And I didn't go that far, but he had this bow there, and he said, try this bow. He said.
Thank you.
And I tried it, and the bass sounded so much better. And he had he had a few Fretchners there, and he had a few Ubrechts. These.
Yes, beautiful.
And this bow just sounded like just blew them all out of the water, and I thought, wow, that's really,
quite unusual,
really odd. Yeah, and so the theory behind it is it's apparently Taut back in the day developed this quite high head, and on Taut's bows, because of the high head, and because French bows and violin bows and cello bows, this is just not that high, or not as high as on a traditional German bow. This distance was almost the same as this, and apparently the theory is that helps the vibrations go through the stick more easily, and so this was the theory that he made this bow with.
Okay.
And so that's why the frog is
so much smaller.
So much smaller. That being said, I've seen this next to Fretschner bows where this distance is the same, but the frog is just more filled out.
Sure.
But and because I asked him, I said, "Oh, is it a hybrid hybrid bow? Can it also be played French?" And I don't play French, but I was just curious. And I guess I was in Berlin, in Germany, and he said, "No, it is not all to be used like that." And I thought, "Oh, okay,
stop."
Yes, but that being said, I've given this to a few French bow players, and they've also said, "No, this is definitely not a French bow."
Yeah.
So it is just a very odd looking German bow that does indeed sound really good.
Yeah. Well, it's absolutely wonderful, and we're going to get the privilege of hearing you play this bow and this bass in a short performance that we filmed in the foyer at the 2021 Dutch Double Bass Festival, and we're right in the middle of it now, James, but maybe we could finish off just before we cut to that performance.
Yeah.
What's next for the Dutch Double Bass? I mean, we are in the middle of it now, but just in a general way, can people get excited? Can people start to think about the future?
Yeah.
I
hope
guess
so. Yeah, I hope so. I mean, it's definitely, this is the third time we do it. And it's, we started like naively with this idea and just went, full force into it. And have just been kind of learning on the job. And so far this edition has gone better than the two before, which is great.
Yeah.
And we definitely want to continue and get more people in and sort of spread the love of the bass, because it is a bass festival, but the whole idea is that it's not just for bassists.
It felt very much like you were reaching out into the community within Rotterdam, and there were posters, and there were people who aren't bassists attending bass recitals.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
Exactly, and that's the whole. That's kind of that's the mission, is that you sort of have this incredible festival that happens to be a bass festival, but that
it's a music festival.
Exactly, it's a music festival, and so that's So I hope we have many more editions.
Well, it's been an absolute joy. Thank you so much for your invitation. We've really been so excited to come to Rotterdam, and myself and the team have just loved meeting you, spending time in the wonderful Theatre Zudplein, and we're very much looking forward to the next one. So thank you for watching at home. I hope you've enjoyed this interview with the great James Oesi. Let's have a listen and see how this performance, just done in the theatre, down in the reception area, coffee cups clinking in the background, people walking around. Let's see how they experience Bach and I think you're going to be really thrilled. So thanks for watching, and thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you.